Hi, my name is Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel Bandy's Books, and today we are here to talk about the book of the month predictions for September 2023. Let me just start by saying there are so many books coming out in September 2023. Last month was a little easier to pick. This month I have quite a few selections. So buckle up for a longer video than usual. First, we're going to talk about the horror and thriller category. The first selection is The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White. This currently has a 4.73 and about 407 ratings on Goodreads so far. This book is set in London in 1883, and the veil between the living and dead has thinned. Violet-eyed mediums commune with the spirits, and 16-year-old violet-eyed Silas Bell is set for an arranged marriage at the end of the year. Autism, career goals, and gender identity aside. When Silas attempts to escape the arranged marriage, he is diagnosed with veil sickness and shipped off to Braxton's sanatorium and finishing school, where he will either become a proper wife or disappear. When ghosts of students past reach out to Silas and beg him for help, Silas decides he's going to expose the school, at least if the school doesn't break him first. So I picked this book because this is the author that wrote Hallowed with Us, which was a big smash hit last year, and I feel like this book has some really good hype coming into it. We have some spooky vibes with the mediums and the ghosts and the revenge and all of that I think are perfect for the fall season, but it has a bit more substance because it's going to get into gender identity, it's going to get into like sanatoriums and like medieval medical practices, and I think this would be a great pick for Book of the Month. And our selection for the horror genre is Black River Orchard by Chuck Wendig. This currently has a 4.41 and 112 ratings on Goodreads so far. In this book, a small town is transformed by dark magic when they discover an apple orchard whose apples, upon consumption, provide you peculiar gifts. There's just one problem: the more apples you consume, the more apples you want to consume, even when the roots of the apple trees extend back to the bloody past of the town's origins. I picked this book because Chuck Wendig is a pretty popular horror author. I believe he wrote the Book of Accidents, and while he hasn't been featured previously, I think this has that kind of spooky, creepy horror vibe that Book of the Month likes to pick up as we move into the fall months. Next up is the romance category, the hardest one for me to predict every month. The first book that I'm predicting is The Witch of Wild Things by Raquel, Vasquez, Gilliland. This currently has a 4.31 and 63 ratings on Goodreads so far. This follows a character named Sage Flores who has been running from her family and their peculiar set of gifts since the death of her younger sister, Sky. 8 years later, she returns home to her old job and finds herself partnered up with Tennessee, the boy who broke her heart back in high school, and finds out that he's turned into a mature and sexy man. With a dead sister who keeps bringing her coffee and another sister whose anger literally fills the sky with lightning, Sage doesn't have time for romance. But the chemistry and tension between her and Tennessee is supercharged and inevitable. So I picked this book because I feel like those witchy type romances with like sort of supernatural vibes always do really well in the fall as everyone gets ready for Halloween. I like that this has some supernatural vibes without being like overtly witchy. I think it's kind of a nice balance for a fallish romance. Then we have Thank You for Sharing by Runya, Katz. This currently has a 4.04 and about 203 ratings on Goodreads so far. When Daniel's marketing firm is hired to work with the Chicago Museum where Leo works, the two of them are forced to collaborate. As the two of them work together, the tension and chemistry continues to build until they're forced to confront the argument that broke them apart all those years in the past. I picked this book because this is a debut author, and I know that Book of the Month likes to feature debut authors from time to time. I would love to see a debut, especially in the romance category, because we often see them featuring authors who are already wildly famous, already have a following, who are going to sell books whether it's in Book of the Month or not. So I would love to see kind of an underdog romance get selected this month. That said, I did pick one major romance release this month, and that is The Long Game by Elena Armas. This currently has a 3.98 and about 571 ratings on Goodreads so far. After a video of an altercation between soccer executive Adeline and the Miami Flames mascot is made public, Adeline is banished to a middle of nowhere North Carolina town to coach a kids' soccer team as penance. With kids who show up to soccer practice in tutus, keep pet goats, and a legendary goalkeeper who is determined to run her out of town, Adeline has her hands full, but she refuses to fail on her road to redemption. So this is the author of The Spanish Love Deception, which was a selection, I believe, last year and was wildly popular. So I think that there's a high likelihood that Book of the Month would select this book, at least as an add-on, if not a main selection. Again, I would rather see a debut author, but I think that if they're going to pick a repeat author, this might be the one. Next up is the historical fiction genre. My first selection is The Phoenix Crown by Kate Quinn and Chang. This currently has a 4.20 and 49 reviews on Goodreads so far. Versailles, 1912. An American millionaire very publicly gifts his bride the Phoenix Crown, a priceless relic of Beijing's summer palace, and sets off one quest for justice. San Francisco, 1906. 4 very different women happen to cross paths. One man seemingly holds all the answers to their questions in his collection of Chinese antiques, including the Phoenix Crown. The women's lives are torn apart when an earthquake hits San Francisco and the man disappears, leaving a mystery in his wake. I picked this book because Chang has been featured by Book of the Month previously for the Library of Legends, and while Kate Quinn has never been featured by Book of the Month before, she is a very well-known historical fiction author. I think the two of them coming together to create this historical fiction piece with maybe some elements of like magical realism or mystery mixed in, it seems like this is just going to be a really fun, interesting read. I'd love to see Book of the Month pick this up. My second selection is All You Have to Do Is Call by Kerri Maher. This currently has a 4.24 and about 55 ratings on Goodreads so far. This book is set in Chicago in the early 1920s. We have a company named Jane, which is all about women helping women in tight spots. Veronica, the company's founder, must live a double life. While at work, she helps women find their freedom, but at night, she plays the role of a conventional housewife. And she isn't the only one forced to make difficult decisions. I selected this book because this seems like a very timely historical fiction. With the attack on women's rights here in the United States, this book really speaks to that issue, and while it's set in a time past, I think it has a lot of relevant messaging to the current times. I could see this being a very poignant selection for Book of the Month. My third historical fiction selection is The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. This currently has a 4.18 and 192 ratings on Goodreads so far. A servant girl escapes from a colonial settlement into the wilderness. She carries little with her aside from her wits and the spark of God that burns inside of her. What she finds in this hidden land will surpass the limits of her imagination and all that she's been taught. I picked this book because Lauren Groff has previously been featured by Book of the Month. I absolutely love her writing. I read The Matrix, I want to say last year, and really enjoyed that. I feel like this is kind of interesting. The summary doesn't really give you a ton of what's going on. There's some mystery about who this girl is, the colony that she's escaping from, what she's going to find in the wilderness. I love everything involved in this story so far, and I would love to see it selected for Book of the Month. Next up is our fantasy, mythology, and sci-fi category. My first selection is Herc by Phoenicia Rogerson. This currently has a 3.93 and 122 ratings on Goodreads so far. This is described as a feminist and queer retelling of Hercules' story. This story is told via his friends, his enemies, his wives, his children, his lovers, his rivals, his gods, and his victims. I think that this is super interesting that we're not actually hearing Hercules' story from himself. We're hearing it from the people observing and witnessing different parts of his story to complete a full picture. Mythology picks have been super popular within Book of the Month, and this is a debut for this author. So the combination of debut and mythology, maybe it'll just push it into a Book of the Month selection. Then we have Foul Heart Huntsman by Gong. This currently has a 4.54 and 156 ratings on Goodreads so far. This is book number 2 to Foul Lady Fortune. Set in 1932 Shanghai, there is a threat of Japanese invasion. Rosalind Ling has been exposed as a spy, Lady Fortune. Trapped in her apartment by the media storm outside, and with her partner Orion having been taken, she arranges a national tour that's set to boost morale, but is really an excuse for her to escape and go after him. I picked this book because Book of the Month seems to feature everything that Gong does. They recently just featured Immortal Longings. They featured the first book in this series, Foul Lady Fortune. I don't think this will be a main pick just because they just featured her like a month ago as a main pick, but I do expect that this will be an add-on since they've already featured the first book in this series. And my third selection for this category is a science fiction called Dreambound by Dan Frey. This currently has a 4.09 and about 76 ratings on Goodreads so far. This book follows Byron Kidd, a cynical reporter. His 12-year-old daughter vanishes, leaving a note behind that says she's off to explore the hidden world, a magical land from a popular book series. She isn't the only child who's set off in search of these lands. Byron secures an interview with author Annabelle Tobin and discovers a truth more fantastic than he can imagine. I selected this book because I feel like it's been a while since Book of the Month has featured a science fiction novel, and this one sounds really interesting. I love the idea of kids running away to find magical lands that they found in books, but I feel like there's going to be like a darker mystery element to this, and I'm really invested. I'll probably be reading this whether it's selected or not. Next up is our contemporary fiction and literary fiction category. My first selection is Evil Eye by Etaf Rum. This currently has a 4.38 4.36 and about 53 ratings on Goodreads so far. This book follows Yara, a Palestinian-American woman who was raised in Brooklyn by a conservative and often volatile family. Yara feels like she's gotten to follow her dreams. She balances her professional aspirations with being a traditional wife. But when problems arise at work, Yara is put on probation and is told that she must do mandatory counseling to keep her job. Though her mother blames a family curse, Yara must reckon with a childhood that she thought she left behind. The reason that I selected this book is because Etaf Rum was previously featured for Book of the Month for A Woman Is No Man. That was a pretty popular book, really well written. This one sounds like it's going to be very poignant. I love that it explores like family and roots and what happens to us in childhood and how it affects us as an adult. I think those are all topics that Book of the Month likes to delve into, and I could see this being a big hit. After that, we have A House for Alice by Diana Evans. This currently has a 4.38 and only 8 reviews so far on Goodreads. London, June 2017. Cornelius Winston Pitt. Complicated husband, estranged father, and patriarch of the Pitt family dies in a fire started by a cigarette left burning. Alice, the Pitt family matriarch, decides that she wants to spend the rest of her years in her homeland of Nigeria. Her 3 daughters are torn on whether she should go or not, and Melissa, her youngest daughter, is grappling with a failed relationship and causing the pillars of the Pitt family to crack. I selected this book because it is, above all else, a family saga. We see the death of one person and its effect in all of the different members of the family, and I feel like Book of the Month likes to feature stories like that. I also love that this is like England and Nigeria. We have a mix of cultures. This book reminds me of some of Book of the Month's previous picks, and I think this could be a very strong selection. Next up, we're going to cover nonfiction and memoirs. I have 2 selections for this category this month. First up is While You Are Out, an intimate family portrait of mental illness in an era of silence by Meg Kissinger. This currently has a 4.75 and 69 ratings on Goodreads so far. This book starts in 1960s Chicago. Meg's family seems to live a charmed life with 8 kids and 2 loving parents, but behind closed doors, not everything is as it seems. Mom is heavily medicated and hospitalized for anxiety and depression. Dad is manic and prone to violence. The children are in the throes of bipolar disorder and depression, and 2 of the siblings end up taking their own lives. Through it all, the Kissingers never talk about it, which spurs Meg towards a career in journalism focused on our country's mental health care system. I selected this book because though Book of the Month doesn't often pick up nonfiction, when they do, they usually like to pick very poignant and important topics. Everything that I've read by Book of the Month that was nonfiction was very emotional, very interesting, very impactful, and had a lot of relevant things to say about society. And I think mental health is such an important topic. And we have this memoir of this person who's experiencing just the most extreme of mental health crises within her family. Literally, it touches every single member. I think that this book is going to be just incredibly important, relevant, and very touching. My second selection is Thicker Than Water by Kerry Washington. This has a 5-star rating so far, but actually only 1 rating on Goodreads so far. While on a drive in LA, Kerry receives a text message that's going to send her on a journey of self-discovery. In an instant, her life is torn apart and everything she thought she knew about herself is thrown into question. This memoir explores who her truest self is and how to find a deeper sense of connection and belonging. I selected this book because Book of the Month likes to feature celebrity memoirs. We've seen books like Will do really well. People have this fascination with learning about the behind the scenes of celebrity lives, and Kerry Washington is a pretty big celebrity. She's a very talented actress, and I could see a lot of interest around what's going on behind the scenes in her life. And finally, we're gonna go into short story collections. Usually if I have one of these, it's only 1, but this month there's 2 that I think would actually be really cool picks for Book of the Month. The first up is In These Hallowed Halls, which is a dark academia collection. It's got some pretty big names attached to it. We have Emma Murillo, Olivia Blake, Susie Yang, and a whole bevy of other well-known dark academia authors coming together to create a whole collection of dark academia stories. I think that with the popularity of dark academia, especially as we move into the fall months, this would be a wise selection for Book of the Month. We have some really big names attached to the project, and I just feel like this is like perfect for spooky season. And then we have Never Whistle at Night, an Indigenous dark fiction anthology. This anthology features authors like Brandon Hobson, Tommy Orange, Nick Medina, Rebecca Rowanhorse, and David Heska Wambley-Waden, along with a whole bevy of other authors. Seriously, the list of people attached to this book is phenomenal. The summary of this book says that many Indigenous people believe that one should never whistle at night. This belief takes many forms across many different cultures, but the one thing that they all have in common is that belief that whistling at night will cause evil to appear. So I selected this anthology because it has the horror vibes that are so popular as we move into the fall and spooky season. But I love that it's coming from an Indigenous perspective. I love that it got a whole group of awesome Indigenous authors together to collaborate on this piece. I have an ARC of this and I've just started it, but I'm really into it so far. And also, the cover of this book is so phenomenally good. I think it would make such a beautiful book of the month selection. And one of the authors that's featured in this anthology was previously featured by Book of the Month before. That would be David Heska Wombley-Whiten for Winter Counts. So he would be a repeat author, although many of the other authors would not. So those are all of my potential picks for September 2023 Book of the Month. Let me know in the comments below which of these books you're excited to read, which ones you'd like to see show up in your Book of the Month box. Make sure you hit that like button as well. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button down below as well as the notification bell so that you never miss a video. And in particular, you can see my Book of the Month predictions every month. Thanks for joining. Bye.